This show offends God, and it offends me. Thus spoke one critic in reaction to the seminal 1997 drama Oz. Today, Oz is perhaps overshadowed and forgotten, but that doesn't mean its influence doesn't permeate throughout the medium of television. Whether it's The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, or The Wire, all can trace their roots back to the Emerald City. Hell, Vince Gilligan said that he made Breaking Bad because he thought he could get away with it after watching Oz. But before this show was offending God and the God-fearing, Oz was just an idea in the creator's mind. Tom Fontana. In an interview, he explained, "I grew up watching cop shows where at the end of the episode, the bad guy traditionally got arrested and went to prison, while the cops sat around in the last scene and did a funny little joke. Then we all went to bed feeling satisfied. While I was doing Homicide, where the bad guy didn't always get arrested, I thought maybe the more interesting story is what happens to these people when they go to prison." In David Simon's nonfiction book, there's a section about a prison riot in Baltimore, and I decided to expand on it for an episode and bring back some of the murderers we had seen in previous seasons. That was my first swing at seeing what writing a prison show might be like. Today, we might think of HBO as a great place to pitch a show, but back in the 90s, it was anything but. Back in 1997, who had HBO? Oz star Dina Winters said. I didn't, did you? And given the content of the show, we were going to work thinking, are these people crazy? No one's gonna watch this. More than just the stars of the show thought HBO was a bad place to have a pilot. Fontana said he literally was yelled at by friends of his and peers of his on the drama side of television. They said to me, "Why are you going to work over at HBO? It's a movie channel. Nobody watches it." And I said, "Well, who cares if nobody watches it? They're going to let me make the show I want to make." Literally, people thought it would kill my career, and I made the wrong tactical move, and that I should be doing Touched by an Angel. I'd like to tell you that I'm the visionary who had this incredible sense that cable would someday dominate the television world, but it wasn't that. It was simply that there was an open door, and I went through it. Still, the deck was stacked against Oz from being a success. HBO at the time only gave Fontana $1 million for their first 1-hour drama. That may sound like a lot of money, but for what they were going for, it wasn't enough money. Fontana explained, "We shot it in Baltimore while we were shooting Homicide, so we would book a location and I would say, okay, we'll shoot the Homicide scene here and then we'll shoot the Oz scene. So in a way, NBC paid for it. For Oz to have any chance to succeed, it would take one hell of a pilot." The suits at HBO that greenlit the show really do deserve a round of applause. We always think in hindsight that certain shows will be a success. But pilgrims, people that go first, oftentimes even they don't realize what they're doing. An example of this is Heinrich Hertz, who is a German physicist. He was the first person who proved the existence of the electromagnetic waves, something that would be instrumental in the use of radio and microwaves. However, when asked about the application of his discoveries, he replied, "Nothing, I guess." My point is that in the moment we take for granted that dark, gritty dramas will always be a smash hit, that anti-heroes like Walter White, Don Draper, Tony Soprano will be able to connect with the audience. But Oz in some ways has more in common with Game of Thrones, in that in Oz, anyone could die. This premise would be shown in the pilot very clearly by one character in particular, but before we get to that, let's backtrack and talk about location. Most of the time when you picture a prison, people tend to picture iron bars across cells, something out of Shawshank or Escape from Alcatraz. Oz was different. Oz was a special kind of hell. Once again, it's interesting to see how much time was spent researching prisons to make sure that this place would be authentic. In the words of the creator, while developing Oz, I spent about 2 years going to prisons all over the country, and I saw that there were two kinds, these old Gothic horror chambers and new experimental prisons. But there was never a place where the two were together, and it was important to me that you had the old and the new butting up against each other. When I talked to prisoners who were in places like Emerald City, they were very clear that it was worse for them because they had no privacy. I found that very moving, and so that's where Emerald City came from. And the idea of glass so that everybody could see everybody else at any given moment. In a pilot, it's important to establish main characters. You want to spend time acquainting audiences with the people you are asking them to return to next week. You don't want to waste time introducing characters or concepts that the audience won't be seeing. So naturally, Oz did the opposite.
Fontana recalls when he talked with Chris Albrecht, a producer at HBO, he said, "What's the one thing you're absolutely not allowed to do on broadcast television?" And I said, "Kill the lead in a pilot." And he said, "Well, then go ahead and do it." So I hired John Setta, and I told him this is what's going to happen. He was cool with it, and then I hired him on Homicide to sort of compensate for the fact that he was killed off.
The brilliance of this gamble is it sets up the premise of Oz, a place where the audience is never allowed to relax, because the men in prison are never allowed to either.
Thanks for everyone who watched to the end, probably all two of you. I also want to thank Ethan Alter and Matt Grober. They both had interviews with the cast of Oz that I'm going to link in the description, but sometimes linking, they deserved a verbal shout out. Also, sorry if the audio sucks. I made it on my phone, but if I ever make another video again, I promise to buy a microphone. And to finish up, we have the quote of the week. "I make movies as a form of activism. I believe we learn from what we see in our leaders. I'm proud to play Mason Weaver in at Kong Skull Island movie because she represents the many journalists who risk their lives every day to share us the truth. Weaver leads with compassion and believes that unity cannot be obtained through aggression. I'm excited to share this film with you. And in the meanwhile, I'm thrilled to have this platform as a way to connect us. Let's work together. Let's be open to learning from each other." Thank you for those wise words, Brie Larson. Thank you.